Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And this evening we'll be talking about fear, forgiveness, and society. Boy, that's a big title, huh? And my guest this evening is Michael Sonnleitner, PhD, professor, teacher, PCC. You're still working?
No, I am officially retired.
That's right. I read that in your material. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling at this moment?
At this moment?
Mm-hmm.
I'm reasonably good, a little bit late in the day for me.
Uh-huh.
If you've been interviewing me about 6 in the morning, that would be perfect.
Really? You're a morning person?
I'm a morning person.
So I'm an all over the place person. I'm a little nervous because whenever I start a show, even though I've been doing it for 16 years, it takes me about 2 or 3 minutes to relax because I've got this built-in instruction that says you've got to do it perfectly, because if you don't do it perfectly, you're a failure.
Huh. Okay, well, I'll watch you very carefully.
You might be trouble. All right. But as you viewers know, we talk about who my guest is, personally, a little history and education and all kinds of other stuff like that. So you have an idea where they're coming from when they have an opinion or something that they're going to talk about during the second half of the show. When we talk about fear, forgiveness, and the future, wow, that's always very shaky for me to read that again. Yeah, we'll talk some more about that, of course. Okay. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Michael, can I call you Michael?
Of course.
If I ask your best friend, who is Michael, what would your best friend say? Michael is what?
Michael is odd. Funny sometimes in a strange way. Michael is honest. He seeks to be truthful. He's committed to nonviolence, and he is seeking to, I guess, make the world a better place, one person at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to start with himself.
I knew that was going to come. I was waiting for it.
That's right.
And are you having any success?
Oh, moderate success. I think most folks who are into education as a vocation, for me, it's a calling. It's not a job. It's not a career.
Uh-huh.
It's been my life for 41 years, teaching at PCC for 27 years, but before that, in the Midwest, it's like a farmer planting seeds.
And PCC is what?
Portland Community College.
Here in
Portland, Oregon.
Oregon, yeah, because you'll be seen worldwide, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that. So I want to say hello to my friends in India, especially.
Yes.
Greetings.
Uh-huh.
I hope to get back to see you sometime before I expire from this life.
That's a long time.
Never know.
Yeah. And when and where were you born?
I was born in Wichita, Kansas, 66 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know the Koch brothers, so don't ask me for any money.
Anything significant about your cultural or racial or any kind of heritage that's worth telling to the viewers?
Well, I come from a bedrock Republican family.
Mm-hmm.
My father never voted for a Democrat in his life. I was very proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
And at age 80, left with a perfect record, having never voted for a Democrat in his life.
How'd you change?
Well, that's a long story, but I didn't change entirely. In many ways, I am my father's son. I look into the mirror and sometimes I see him, and that's not all bad.
Of course.
I was raised in a Missouri Synod Lutheran family, very evangelical, Protestant. I still have a very strong religious bent, though I'm no longer a card-carrying member of that particular church.
Well, religious bent, what does that mean if you're not a card-carrying member of that church?
You don't have to be a member of any church, temple or synagogue or mosque to be religious. Religious might throw off some of your viewers. I know the G word is not popular very much in Oregon. The word religion also can be confusing. You can say spiritual if you like. For me, the bottom line is I believe in the existence of soul.
So what does spiritual mean to you? You use that term. What
Spirit. What is you have a good spirit, Don.
Uh-huh.
You can see it in your eyes. See it? Everybody, look at his smile. You can see it.
What is spirit?
Well, what is spirit?
Yes.
Well, what can you not directly see, feel, taste, touch, or smell, but you can see the reflection of it. You can see the presence, not with your eyes, but with your being. I know that sounds kind of new agey, but
And I love it.
the spirit is soul. The soul is that which continues, in my view, to exist after death.
Really now? Do you believe in reincarnation?
I do.
Really?
Yeah.
What are you going to come back
I
at?
told you I was odd.
I love it.
I don't,
That's why I like
don't
you.
know if I planned those things. I will have to feel my way along that path after I leave this body.
I want to come back as a bonobo.
What in the world is that?
That is looks like a chimpanzee, but it's not. It's an ape family,
Yes?
and they solve all of their disagreements by sex.
Well, I wish you well.
Google,
You're a swinger. You like to be in trees. And all right.
yeah. Google bonobos. They're quite an interesting species of ape.
A lot of interesting species. The human species, to me, is the most interesting because we're the ones that are capable of ending life on the planet as we know it. Isn't that a serious tone? Boom. Odd. From funny to boom. Not so funny.
And that was one of my profound questions I ask on rare occasion when it occurs to me, ending humans' life on the planet. How about other life on the planet? Will that disappear too?
Oh, I'm not clairvoyant, but science seems to indicate that fruit flies, cockroaches, and some existing species are incredibly adaptive, will probably mutate, and life will find a way. That comes from Jurassic Park. Life will find a way.
Are you going to see the new Star Wars? We're going to go all over the place here.
I have 2 free tickets. But I've already given them away.
Darn.
There are other people that care about that more than I do.
All right. Talk about your formal education for a bit. You got tons of stuff that you've done in education and education system.
Well, I went to a very good high school for the time in South Seattle, Washington, Highline High School. Very large student body, big drama program. I was in theater, big foreign exchange program. I was in that club. In fact, in high school, when I was president of the foreign exchange program at my high school, we integrated our high school. We were lily white for the most part, and
that was kind of a while ago.
yeah, this was back in the 1960s. About 1965, 66, we managed to have the first black person to come to the high schools from Ethiopia, an exchange student. Became one of my best friends.
Really?
Another was from Argentina, the first Latino person at the high school.
Did you get this kind of behavior from your mom and dad?
I didn't actually do this. I just embraced it. I love meeting people and learning about other cultures. I'm not sure where that comes from.
Okay.
Possibly the previous life.
Okay. I'm not going there because I don't know what the heck that is either. However, I am not sure what's going to happen when I toss these mortal coils off. I like to think if I do come back, I want to come back as a bonobo or a Labrador Retriever. I love those dogs.
Right.
But it's going to be a dog. So you got your...
I went to high school, then I went to Whitman College for my bachelor's degree, After I finished 4 years at Whitman, I did some traveling for the first time out of the country. I spent 6 months traveling in India, at that point in time with a backpack by myself, living with people who had known Mahatma Gandhi.
Really?
This is back in 1971, 72, and there were people still alive then. Personal secretaries that were still living, that had worked with him, members of his family. And so I became influenced heavily by a Gandhian way of looking at the world. Not that I embraced it entirely. I'm probably at least 70% in agreement with the old man, Mohandas.
Yeah.
We have our disagreements, and that's okay. He would be respectful of that.
Yes, of course.
After that trek, I went to graduate school at the University of Minnesota, where I got my master's and PhD, partly in South Asian studies. Political science was the major, but I focused heavily upon comparative politics, South and East Asia.
What persuaded you to go in that direction?
Well, Gandhi was from India,
Of course.
and so naturally I would be somewhat interested in learning more about his country, and I continued my research on Gandhi. I've read just about everything that is existing that he wrote. There are over 50 volumes of the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, 500 pages each.
I didn't know that.
They're collected with his letters, private papers, such as have managed to survive. And a very close friend of mine, who I consider like my sister in India, Dina, if you're watching this, hello. Hope to see you again sometime.
Yeah.
Dina Patel is finishing a project of digitalizing the entire collected works of Mahatma Gandhi and making it available for everyone for free.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a 5-year project that she's been engaged in.
So in that 6-month period, you've gotten some things there you probably wouldn't have gotten someplace else.
I became a vegetarian
Oh, really?
because I didn't see any other reason for me not to be. And it became an emotional sort of choice for me, if it was a choice at all. When you see the suffering of animals and people side by side, the arbitrary distinction between human beings and our other species, brothers and sisters, becomes very faded. And so for the last 40, what has it been, 45 years, no meat.
You're a vegetarian today?
Oh, sure. You can ask my wife. It drives her crazy.
She's not?
I'm not an evangelical vegetarian. No, she's not. It's very handy to have people around to taste the foods at a potluck so that you know what to avoid. So there's just lots of experiences, and and it has to do with the issue of fear, because we all have fears. It's natural to have fear. I think there are different levels of it, and our experiences, if we're very insecure with our basic needs, food, clothing, water, you have more of a primal fear. And I think people are able to overcome their fears to matters of degree, the more you're able to be in an environment that is supportive.
Yes.
Gandhi used to say that God comes to the poor in the form of bread. And that if you don't have basic bread, the basic needs of life, it's kind of silly to be preaching for higher spirituality. When your bread needs are taken care of, basic needs, then you can have security needs taken care of. You can have your feelings, needs for belonging more taken care of, your social needs, your needs for self-respect and respect from others. And am I sounding like Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yes. I think to the extent that you become what Maslow would call a self-actualized person, and what Gandhi would describe as a self-realized person, in a spiritual sense, then your fears progressively just drop away. You don't worry about even dying anymore. You're concerned about living fully.
What do you know about Buddhism, and how much do you know about it, and do you embrace its ideas and where it comes from?
I'm no expert. I've studied some Buddhism, the Mahayana and Theravada, different paths.
Yes.
I think the large raft, Mahayana Buddhism, embodies some of what I find extremely appealing: compassion that is this worldly. Buddha didn't care too much about responding to even issues of reincarnation. Theology wasn't of importance to him. It was more a matter of what can we do to serve others and to relieve suffering in this world. I respect that. I'm very much that way myself.
Okay.
So
And
that gives you a flavor.
So what I've seen about your bio, you've been in other places of the world, and you were involved in the civil rights activities during that period of time?
I was a little late. Martin Luther King was one of my heroes. I can recall the dogs attacking the demonstrators in Birmingham on TV. And that was a shocker for me and raised a lot of questions in my household. The first demonstration that I ever went on was led by Dick Gregory.
Dick Gregory.
Dick Gregory, who's still alive.
He's still kicking, huh?
He is, and he's a vegetarian too, by the way.
Oh, yes, I know that.
Though I thought he was kind of crazy at that point in time when it comes to diet. He'd be fasting, for days and even weeks. It was a small town called Somerville in Tennessee, where a black man had been killed for improperly expecting to go into a local grocery store. I was a student at Fisk University at the time on an exchange program from Whitman, and there was a call to go to that nearby town, Somerville, and have a march protesting the killing of that man. And so, young man as I was, and young people typically aren't afraid to die because they don't think it's possible. They're too young. They take risks. Yeah. And I went, and that was my first demonstration. A lot of hate. A lot of hate in the eyes of the people of that town.
Did that do something to you, something serious or deep that you're aware of? I can imagine what it must have been like in that situation and feeling the hatred of those people, collective hatred.
Oh, I was a traitor to my race.
Oh, yeah?
In their eyes.
Yeah.
Worse.
Nigger lover.
Worse.
Yeah.
And it was a new experience for me. I felt reasonably protected and secure in the numbers of people at the march. Wasn't particularly afraid. Later I would take other risks in other contexts. I spent a summer in Northern Ireland working with Catholic and Protestant youth in the Bogside area of Derry. This was 1975, when the IRA bombing campaign was very active in the city. I wanted to experience a little of what would be a combat situation. I wanted to relate to friends of mine who were soldiers, some of whom did not come back from the Vietnam War. Gandhi always thought of the need to have nonviolent soldiers, people who are willing to die but not to kill, unarmed physically but armed spiritually. That's what I've been trying to build little by little over the years in myself, and I can't say how successful that has been. I can't say.
Okay.
Test me. You don't know until the challenge occurs.
Yeah. Let's keep moving,
Yes.
because we want to get this things you want to talk about further. We talked about your education. Any other education other than formal education that you can cite that makes you who and what you are today?
I spent 15 summers of my life picking fruit in eastern Washington, a little north of Wenatchee.
And that was educational.
Extremely.
Really? How so?
Most of my co-workers were undocumented. I now know. I didn't know at the time. Up from Mexico. Many were also poor white folks from Arkansas, Oklahoma, kind of on a migrant trail. This collection of people became my family. Every summer I went back to my family. I enjoyed the hard work and the wonderful fruit, but I learned a lot from my family, my orchard family.
Okay.
And I learned that having a PhD is not very impressive, that the School of Hard Knocks, and a lot of people have had a lot harder knocks than me, I can also learn from their wisdom. And so even if a person cannot read or write, that doesn't mean that they're not smart. They might be incredibly smart and have a tremendous amount to teach us about life. So I guess I'll call that a different kind of PhD.
Yes, of course.
And of course it reinforced my interest in the diversity of human cultures and people that exist on this planet. Like I said, we had one Latino in my high school, but we were majority Latino in my summers at the orchard. I still wish that I'd learned how to speak Spanish. Maybe in the next life.
So talk a little bit about your work as in education, all those years. Give us a brief rundown.
It
of
was
what happened.
fun. I encourage my students to do what they really enjoy. Hopefully they can make some money at it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a student for life, be a teacher. I mean, you have to have a student's attitude. You have to continue to learn, to gain more information. Otherwise, you look really silly at test time. And every class day is a test time. If you don't know your stuff, it will show. And so I had 41 years of being a teacher, teaching in the classroom, so I continued to be a student. And I still am.
Uh-huh.
I left the classroom last July 1st because I was elected to my school's board of directors, Portland Community College.
Yes.
And I became the first former employee now of Portland Community College, teacher or otherwise, to be on the board in 50 years. I ran because I believed that we needed to have that voice, among many others, on the board. Anything that I say tonight, by the way, is Michael Sunleitner speaking.
Uh-huh.
In no way does he speak for the board as a whole. He is not authorized to say anything that is pertinent to the board's business itself of a confidential nature, and I won't.
Mm-hmm.
I won't.
Mm.
But this is a different venue of education for me,
Yes.
and I hope to have some impact that's positive in someone's eyes.
Do they see you as odd? The other board members?
Well, I can't, so you'd have to ask them. I think a lot of people see me as odd, and it's not something that I necessarily want, but I long came to conclude that students and most people see through falsity pretty fast. And if you try to pretend to be someone that you're really not inside,
Yeah.
you just don't ring true. You don't ring true you can't expect to have people listen to you very much. They don't trust you. And so I am who I am, evolving. About 5 years ago, I stopped wearing shoes and I just wear flip-flops. That's partly because my last trip to India, where I had a Fulbright scholarship grant, I was teaching Gandhi in India. It was hot and it was muggy in the state of Kerala, and most people wore sandals or something like flip-flops.
Yeah.
And I just became accustomed to that. I kind of identified with it, psychologically, I think. And so I continue. And that's odd. I mean, when I went to the leadership conference at the Oregon Convention Center just this past week, where there was a governor and the two senators from the state and Congress people. I think out of 2,000 or 3,000 people in that large room, I was probably the only one wearing flip-flops. Though some women, I think, wear shoes that are not often weather appropriate. And that's okay. If they're comfortable, I'm especially happy for them.
We're going to move ahead pretty fast now to get to the meat of the program, what's going on. Even though I'd like to linger longer with what we're talking about, I'm enjoying being with you and being aware that you're seeing me and nothing I have to hide from you. So you're interested in me to see my spirit of what's going on inside of me. You made a comment to that effect about 5 minutes ago, and I appreciate that. So since you've been retired, what have you been doing pretty much?
Mostly PCC board, Portland Community College Board of Directors.
Yes.
It's an elected board with 7 members. I represent about 102,000 voters in a good portion of southeast Portland and some of northeast. At least I was elected by them. I'm not sure how well I represent them, but that's for them to decide.
Okay.
I try to relate to them. And so in that attempt, I've also become active in my neighborhood association. So I'm chair of the Montevilla Neighborhood Association. There are 95 neighborhood associations in the city of Portland. There are 7 associations of neighborhood associations. One of those is called Southeast Uplift. Southeast Uplift is a coalition of 20 different neighborhood associations. And so I'm also on the board of Southeast Uplift.
Oh my gosh.
And so those are my 3 large commitments in retirement. The PCC board, where I carry on, in a sense, my education vocation, hoping to be of assistance to the institution and its students for some years to come. But I also am very active in my neighborhood association that has been experiencing certain challenges recently, including a decision by I guess you'd say another educational institution within Montevilla area to seek an exemption from the Department of Education so that they can exclude transgendered people from their campus. It's a very conservative religious university. And we're working with them to seek to have a dialogue, in the very least, perhaps a town hall meeting. I've offered to moderate such a town hall meeting so that we could listen to them and their concerns, their religious concerns, and they might be able to listen to others as well.
That's further evidence of how odd you are to take that position and argue.
People need to be respected.
Of course.
What they stand for or what their actions include don't necessarily have to be respected. I can care about Donald Trump, and I do, as a human being. The fact that he's a billionaire is just a fact. He is a human being. I can disagree with a good portion of what he has to say these days. That's separate. I believe that we need to respect other people as people and then respectfully disagree with their positions or their words. And in the communication that transpires, hopefully we all can learn something.
Let me ask you a few more questions before we take a break, okay? Because you and I can go on like this for quite a time. And
You don't like Donald Trump very much?
I feel about him. Never mind. I don't want to get out sidetracked.
No, it's okay. I could interview you some too, you know.
Of course. And you have a partner, a wife, a boyfriend,
Yes.
girlfriend.
I have a wife.
And
She has me,
and
for
children.
better or for worse.
Children.
I have 3 children, biological, and then one who is adopted, a former foster daughter. She is born in Mexico, so I have, all of my children are of Mexican heritage, so far. Margarita is 32, and the others are all younger. My youngest is 25. And I hope tomorrow that I might help her close a deal on her first ever automobile purchase. And so I'm quite involved in my family. They keep me very busy.
All right. Your political persuasion, how would you characterize yourself? That's a dumb question for the viewers. Are you left, right, or center, or off the continuum, or what? Politically.
Politically, I would be green, most accurately described as a fairly conservative green, if you know the different factions within the green movement.
I think so.
I'd be probably more of a fundy green, very concerned about process, having all voices heard. To me, that's critical to any result that you might achieve that is environmentally sound or otherwise. So I've been active with the Green Party of Oregon for some 20 years, before Nader. Before that, I was registered Republican for a time. I was also registered Democrat for a time.
Further evidence that you're really odd. I am odd too. That's a compliment.
Okay, but I think everyone has truth.
Of course.
And it's important to listen so that you can piece together what makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And that's always what I've asked my students to do for themselves. And that means I certainly don't want clones of Michael Sonnleitner. He's a little too imperfect to be worthy of replication.
Name 2, 3, or 4, whatever human beings from the past or alive today that you particularly look up to or looked up to or admire. Any
That are
names?
still alive today?
Or dead. It doesn't matter.
Oh, well, I certainly look up to my dad. He was a single parent with an only child, me, for much of my youth, and he was a remarkable father and mother. He is high on my list.
Okay.
Martin Luther King Jr., I've already mentioned, is a childhood hero,
Yes.
as also was John Wayne, by the way. I say with a little grimace. You know, we're influenced by the media. Gandhi is certainly there. Dorothy Day, active in the Catholic worker movement, and being considered recently for potential sainthood. My wife is an influence upon me, and she doesn't often hear that. But she deserves to hear that. So we have a lot of influences upon us.
Okay, let's stop here because they're going to yell at me if we don't take a break. Can we take
Okay.
a break, Mr. Director? Okay, we're back, Mike. You pointed at me, so it means I got to talk. Thanks for staying tuned. And for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. My guest this evening is Dr. Michael Sonnleitner, who has done so many things, and I admire him so much for what he's done in his life regarding social issues and what's really important, how human beings need to behave toward each other. The title of the show is Fear, Forgiveness, and the Future. Why did you choose that title, Michael?
I think especially today, and it's been growing for some time, we're living in a kind of a culture of fear. Insecurity. We've collectively oftentimes are told by George Bush and others that our way of life is under attack by Al-Qaeda, by ISIL, by our neighbors. They could be anywhere. They could be bringing guns into a Christmas party in San Bernardino. We need to, out of fear, we're told, give up some of our freedoms, be surveyed, have our email communications and phone calls checked. It's all for the sake of our common security. I think fear has almost a cancerous effect upon our culture, the society as a whole, and it's spiritually harmful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major concern. That's why I wanted to discuss fear a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, fear is understandable. It's legitimate.
Okay.
Most folks want to live a fairly good, long life. But Martin Luther King, one of my heroes, once said, a person has not truly lived unless there's something they're willing to die for.
Yes.
And so I also believe that. It's not the length of your life, but the quality of it while you're here, what you do with it, that makes the difference. Both what gives you your self-fulfillment, but also what is your legacy that you leave behind for others. And so I'm very concerned about a fear-consumed culture, especially since 9/11, 2001, but before that we've had periods, of course, throughout the history of the United States. And it comes into the classroom. More and more there's a concern about security because classrooms are under attack. Literally. The Umpqua Community College attack of October 1st of this year, 2015.
Say a few words about that.
Tragic on so many different levels. You know, Roseburg, Oregon, I think, reaped the results of a series of events and circumstances in a young man's life, which brought him to the point of going into one of his own classrooms in the first week of class and killing 9 of his classmates and injuring 10 other people on campus. Fighting out with the police, and I'm not sure whether he killed himself or he was shot by the police. I don't have the final.
Yeah.
It doesn't make much difference. To me, it's just really tragic. And what is worrisome about that event and others like it, San Bernardino and the Paris attacks, is society's response to it. We become fearful, more defensive, compromise our own liberties. State of emergency in Paris. Can't even let climate change people march. They changed their tune on that at the last minute. Just so many casualties. My view is that forgiveness of such violence is far more effective.
Let's stop for a minute and talk a little more about fear, because I hear this discussion and this conversation about fear, and I'm not sure what's really going on, but it's confusing deep in my gut.
Mm-hmm.
There's a dialogue going on now about unreasonable fear. What fear is reasonable and what is unreasonable? So that what are the citizens in America supposed to do today? Deny that they're scared? Are they supposed to?
I would like people to ask themselves, why are you scared? Are you frightened that you might be losing your job? That's legit.
Sure.
Because that might mean that you're not able to provide for your children or have a shelter over your head. But why are you insecure? What is the system that we're living in that does not provide for the basic needs of its citizens? Why do we have hunger? Why do we have houselessness? To me, there's no good excuse for it. We have the resources.
And people are scared because of those things you mentioned. But my concern is that I think we're being conditioned not to look beyond the fear and actual terror Americans feel sometimes when they gather in public places. Because if to look closely and look really deeply, they might discover the real reason that they're scared of, because what's the cause of their fear? Not just those things you're talking about. And I'm talking about America's behavior, or this empire's behavior around the world, and the blowback. Nowadays, it's the Muslims' response to the drones flying over, destroying their families. So if people are more aware of the reality of what it is they need to be afraid of, then they might discover who's really, bottom line, at fault for the conditions that have produced their abject fear or terror.
I wish it was simple. I wish we could just say it's a person or a group. But I think the insecurity that we often feel, the reality of hopelessness that some people come to, depression, feeling alienated. I can't be inside the head of the young man, Chris, at Umpqua, who was pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a condition of autism, which made it very difficult for him to relate to other people. And his single mother, he was an only child also, had the same condition, Asperger's syndrome.
Yes.
And Asperger's is not a mental illness. It's not something that is dangerous. I've had Asperger's students in my classrooms. They're often very brilliant. They are also often very shunned because they're odd, right? They don't relate to other people as social norms might expect. They're challenged in way. We all have our challenges, our own things that make us unique, but they're not appreciated frequently. If you are a person who is shunned for something that you have no control over, if you have very, very few friends, if any, if people laugh at you behind your back, and this is your life, and no one really reaches out, student, administrator, fellow students, to touch you as a human being, embrace you. I'm not saying that we should embrace everyone. We don't have individually that capacity. But surely if someone is feeling alone and isolated, why can't we approach them and ask, are you okay? How is your life? He was not approached. He learned to see through watching on the internet information about the Irish Republican Army and others, that when you kill people, you're noticed. He wanted to be noticed.
Why wasn't he noticed? Why wasn't he approached?
I guess it's always a challenge, isn't it, to approach someone who would appear to be unusual. different than yourself.
It takes unusual people to approach unusual people.
I don't think so. I think it takes compassionate people who say they care about others to have the curiosity to ask themselves, why is that person sitting alone over there? And just go over and say, mind if I sit down? Have a few words.
I'm talking about how the average citizen believes and thinks and considers someone who has Asperger's, whether they're approachable or not. I'm talking about collectively Americans' behavior nowadays toward fellow Americans and toward fellow human beings.
More and more fearful, more and more alienated from one another. It's not my personal responsibility. I'm an individual. I don't have to take care of anybody else. Let them take care of themselves. This sort of cultural attitude is a cancer. It breeds spiritual poverty, and it reaps increasing amounts of violence, because people who are isolated, demeaned, either overcome it and become remarkably amazing people,
Yes.
or they might succumb to the anger and go to the dark side, back to Star Wars.
What do we need to do collectively to have a better relationship with those kinds of people who are potentially terrorists or murderers?
Anybody is.
What do we need to do to head that off or to change things? Collectively and personally.
Well, collectively, I think we need to have a culture that embraces diversity, not just tolerates it.
Sure.
When I mean embrace like I embraced as members of my family the people I worked with in the summers, where I genuinely care about them. We need to embrace each other as best we can, and that means being awkward, because I might meet someone from a culture that I've never touched upon before, and I will say inappropriate things and I'll act awkwardly. But what a learning experience that is. And if they can put up with me, and my awkwardness and my mistakes, then I'm a great beneficiary, and I might actually have something that they can learn from. We build community. We need a culture that is willing to encourage individuals to build community.
How are you going to get other fellow citizens to do what you're talking about?
Follow your heart.
Okay.
Follow your heart. Because if you see someone who is looking isolated, I'm not saying you stop for every person that is asking for something at a freeway entrance. Sometimes I do. It depends on the time and the circumstance. But when you have time, take time. If I see someone on the ground at a freeway entrance and they seem to be having some convulsions, and that's happened a couple times, I stop. Doesn't make me virtuous. It means that that's something I learned from my father. You take personal responsibility. You are your brother and sister's keeper.
Let me tell you a little story about something that I think has some relationship to what we're talking about right now. I go to the health club almost every day, and there is a woman who is very big physically. I want to avoid the definitions. And I would guess that she's between 300 and 400 pounds, and probably average height for a woman. And I'd noticed there's a swimming pool here in the hot tub right next to it. And I'm in the hot tub, and I've noticed her a couple of times. This is months ago. And she's always in the hot tub, and she's looking at the water, and nobody talks to her. And it's never occurred to me before to do what I did then. I decided to talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
And her response was to continue looking at the water, and I moved another 6 inches closer. We were both sitting in the hot tub, water up to here. And I talked to her, I don't know about what, about the weather, but I was really interested because I felt, hey, she's alone and by herself. Nobody knows a thing about her. Everybody ignores her, it seems to me.
Mm-hmm.
And we got engaged in a conversation, and as time has gone by, I find her in the hot tub and I talk with her, and I'm studying singing, and occasionally I'll sing to her in the hot tub. The other morning I came in and she was on a rowing machine. I went over to her before, this was not in the hot tub, and I stopped and I visited with her. And then another club member saw me as I left her to go to the dressing room, and he noticed how she's different now, and he's a very sensitive man, and I told him the story about how she is, and then she told him after I left the dressing room, she says, "I love that man. I love him," because I paid attention to her, and I was genuinely interested in the way I look at her, and I sing to her. Just for a few bars or something, paying attention to her. And that's what it's about. And she's different in that club now. Other people are talking to her now because she's now reaching out a little more. That's a new awareness on my part to do that, the kind of thing you were talking about too.
Well, you have the spirit. I can see it. We started our conversation with that. You shared some of your spirit with her, and she responded. This is a very human thing to happen. And when we don't share with others and show respect and care, we shouldn't be surprised that statistically we're going to have people going berserk.
Yeah.
They are responsible for their behavior. I'm not absolving anybody of responsibility.
Sure.
Chris, who pulled the trigger down in Umpqua, he is responsible.
That's in Umpqua, Oregon.
Yes, Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, Oregon.
In Roseburg, Oregon, yes, okay.
He is responsible for his actions. But he's not the only one. That is, in my view, what is the reality. We are all, to varying degrees, always responsible for our actions.
Or our inactions.
Or our non-actions.
Our non-actions, yes.
And when our non-actions impact other people in ways that they feel more isolated, angry, abandoned, we contribute to the environment out of which extremely violent behavior can be produced.
Sure.
We have a collective responsibility for that violent behavior by our actions and our non-actions. In this culture, we often say, you're either responsible or you're not for your actions. Either or. It's a kind of a binary, dualistic way of looking at the world.
Time is running out very...
And that's not the reality. We are in this life together.
Yes.
And we will save the planet as we know it together, or we won't. Punishing those who transgress our social norms doesn't help them and doesn't help us either.
You have about a minute to tell me about forgiveness. This is terrible. We need a long time to talk about forgiveness.
Well, I would encourage the viewers to Google Amish killing 2006.
Amish killing 2006.
In Pennsylvania, a man entered a one-room schoolhouse, killed 5 Amish girls, students, injured 5 others, killed himself. The response of the Amish community was one of forgiveness. It's almost legendary.
Yes.
And if you learn about it in your own time, since we're running out of time, I would have liked to have discussed that. Because for me, that's a model of a different way to live.
We're going to have to do that next time you're on, and that's really important, I'm sure. we got carried away with our discussions. So
It's fine.
to look in this camera and tell
Yes.
the viewers anything you want to tell them about anything else that we didn't talk about, what's your thoughts would be useful for them to leave watching you here on television? Look in there and tell them.
Well, look to yourselves for wisdom. Question authority, including whatever you might see in me. Share with me and others what your truth is, and be open to listening to others so that you can learn something. Because we're all students as long as we're living. Our purpose, I think, for living is to learn, to come closer to what is true. And best wishes to each of you. Best wishes.
We got to stop. Thank you. And we got time for a PSA 1 or 2, Mr. Director. Just to watch my shows on the web. Google Don Baham YouTube. There's hundreds of shows on there with all sorts of guests, interesting people. And the ACLU, I always want to talk about the American Civil Liberties Union, because in America our civil liberties are in jeopardy and they're being threatened more and more by the ruling elite, Democrat or Republican. And we got to end corporate personhood. We got to reverse that Supreme Court decision by saying that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. Move to amend. KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Mike. Michael.
Like him.
Mike and Mike. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time. Good night.